The galaxy forgot Earth long before Abram learned how to hate. They didn't conquer with fleets or bombs. No, the Federation had been far more clever than that. They strangled humanity slowly, carefully, in ways that did not make noise. The Velians came first, offering peace, offering trade. Earth gave them our leaders, our industries, our trust. In return, they gave us collars. The Eroth wrote the laws that made our births regulated. The Tyra kept our soldiers sedated with implants. The Vin controlled our airwaves, our minds, our education. And the worst part was that humanity let it happen. Abram had grown up inside this cage, not a prison with walls, but a system with invisible bars. His father had died in the Zirconite mines of the Sarn Belt, crushed under rock that wasn't worth the energy of a rescue drone. His mother had been sterilized at 19 because her DNA score didn't meet the Federation's Harmony Index. Abram himself had been classified functional labor at age 7, shackled with a neural inhibitor before he even knew what freedom felt like. They weren't citizens, they weren't even prisoners, they were property. The memory that seared Abram's soul came when he was 13. A boy his age was humming an old Earth song in a work yard, something about rebellion, maybe a tune carried from the old world before Earth was sold off piece by piece. A Rovenian guard, bloated and three-eyed, silenced the boy by smashing his skull against the concrete. No trial, no hesitation, just blood smeared across the ground like waste. The rest of the children froze. Fear kept them still, fear kept them quiet. But that night, Abram did something different. He pressed a broken pipe to the side of his skull and carved out the inhibitor chip that had been controlling his thoughts. He nearly bled to death, but when he woke, for the first time in his life, his mind was his own. They said we were weak, Abram would later whisper to himself in the darkness of an abandoned shaft. But they forgot what happens when weak men have nothing left to lose. From that night, Abram vanished into the cracks of the galaxy. He lived among smugglers and forgotten rebels. He bled, fought, and stole until he learned something the Federation feared more than human anger. They feared free humans. 2 decades later, Abram was no longer just a survivor. He was the fire in the dark. He had built something the Federation refused to believe could exist: a network, an army, a reckoning. Miners became soldiers, slaves became assassins, children became spies. And then came the day of the Galactic Unification Accord, the day the Federation planned to finalize humanity's permanent classification as a servitor species. A polite way of saying, you are ours forever. That was the day Abram struck. His transmission cut through every encrypted channel, every hollow screen, every comm array. His face, scarred, unmasked, human, appeared across the galaxy. You stripped us of our names, you sterilized our blood, you programmed our silence. Now the debt comes due. This is not a war, this is not a rebellion. This is judgment, humanity's judgment, and I am the executioner. The galaxy laughed at first. Diplomats chuckled in their polished chambers. Generals muttered about rogue elements. But the humans still in chains, they didn't laugh. They remembered. 2 hours later, Abram's fighters hit Taxis Prime, the administrative capital of the Vin propaganda network. 48 human rebels burst out of a disguised freighter, flooding the station corridors with fire. They didn't take prisoners. They weren't here for politics. They were here for vengeance. Within an hour, the station was in flames. The Vin overseers who had erased Earth's history lay dead in their own offices. And on every surviving broadcast node, Abram spoke again, this time without distortion. Taxis Prime has fallen. The Vin who erased our memory are ash. The age of silence is over. You erased our past. Now we will carve our names into your bones. The message spread like wildfire. Slave colonies began to riot. Human workers sabotaged their shackles. Federation overseers were dragged into the dirt by hands that had once been too weak to rise. But even as the fire spread, something darker was awakening beneath Abram's war. One of his scouts returned with a stolen data chip from a hidden Federation archive. Abram inserted it into the Foundry's console. His soldiers gathered around as old video logs flickered to life, footage from Earth's earliest days under alien rule. At first it was familiar, contracts signed under duress, medical experiments, sterilizations. But then came a line that froze Abram's blood. Project Compliance. They hadn't just enslaved humanity with chains and propaganda. They had engineered submission into human DNA itself. Generations had been tampered with, rewired to obey. And buried in the files was a single designation. Theta 9. Abram stared at the glowing letters, fists clenched so tight his knuckles bled. Around him, silence filled the chamber like a noose tightening. The Federation had not only shackled humanity, they had tried to re-engineer it. And somewhere out there, Theta 9 was still alive. The foundry was silent after the last log ended. The hollow screen still flickered faint blue light across the faces of men and women who had bled for years to keep this rebellion alive. Project Compliance. Theta 9. Abram stood in the center of the war room, fists trembling against the console. His scars, the deep cut across his jaw, the burn that seared half his arm, seemed to throb under the weight of the revelation. "They didn't just enslave us," whispered Bren, a soldier who had once dug ore until acid ate half his face away. "They rewrote us." Abram's voice was low, but it cut through the silence like a blade. "No, they tried." The others turned to him, fear and fury dancing in their eyes. "They thought they could erase who we are. They thought obedience could be bred like cattle. But look around. Look at what we've done. If their plan worked, we wouldn't be standing here. We are proof it failed." Still, the name Theta 9 burned in Abram's mind like a brand. A voice came from the far side of the chamber, calm, alien. "You are not proof of failure, Abram. You are proof of survival, and there is a difference." The room shifted. The speaker was Kalen, a Xyrillian defector who had joined the rebellion 2 years earlier. Xyrillians were tall, with pale, translucent skin that shimmered like wet stone and black eyes that reflected starlight like mirrors. Kalen had once served in Federation logistics. He had seen the records. He had smuggled data chips to the humans when no one else dared. Now he stepped forward, voice steady. Theta 9 was not a myth. It was real. The Federation feared it so much they buried it even from their own allies. Humans bred not for submission but for awakening. "Awakening?" Abram asked. Kalen's black eyes locked on him. "You've heard the whispers, entire labor camps rebelling after a single prisoner escaped. Colonies where humans suddenly refused to obey as if a flame passed from one to the next. That was Theta 9. They were not soldiers, they were contagion, memory contagion, resistance encoded in blood." Bren spat, "And they buried it just like they tried to bury us." Kalen hesitated. "Not just buried, contained. Theta 9 subjects were unstable. Their rage spread without control. It infected others. Within days, entire camps collapsed into slaughter. Even other enslaved species tore themselves apart. The Federation sealed them in cryovaults, deep ones." Abram's stomach knotted. His hands pressed against the console as the implications hit. "They made us weak, but they feared what we could become. They feared free humans." Kalen's silence was an answer in itself. The room buzzed with unease. Soldiers shifted in their armor. Mechanics exchanged wary glances. For years they had believed their fight was against propaganda, chains, and soldiers. Now they learned their very blood was a battlefield. Abram forced his voice into steel. "Where?" Kalen blinked. "What?" "Where are the cryovaults?" Abram demanded. Kalen hesitated. "Varno 13, a dead world on the edge of the Delta Fringe. The records speak of magnetic storms, tectonic collapse, but I know better. I helped process the resource convoys. I saw shipments vanish into black zones. I traced the energy signatures. Something sleeps there." A murmur rippled through the room. The thought of humans buried in ice and silence for generations chilled even the most hardened fighters. Bren leaned forward, his burned face catching the light. "If they're alive, we free them." Kalen's voice was sharp. "You don't understand. Theta 9 was not human as you know it. They were built to break obedience. They were fire without chains. If you wake them, you may not control them." Abram's eyes hardened. "Then maybe control isn't what we need." The chamber went quiet. For a moment, Abram thought back to the boy who had been killed for humming an Earth song. He remembered the silence afterward, that terrible, obedient silence. No one had moved. No one had spoken. That was what the Federation wanted, silence. Theta 9 was the opposite, not silence, fire. Abram turned back to his people. "We're done hiding in shadows. We are not just rebels. We are not just survivors. We are the reckoning. If Theta 9 is real, if even one of them lives, we will find them. And then the galaxy will remember us." The foundry shook as fists slammed against the tables. Cries rose. Judgment. Fire. Humanity. Kalen said nothing, but his black eyes lingered on Abram longer than they should have, unreadable. 3 weeks later, the rebellion fleet descended on Varno 13. The planet was a frozen ruin at the edge of the Delta Fringe, its skies alive with storms that shredded metal and its surface scarred by canyons glowing faintly with magnetic fire. Even the Federation avoided this world. But Abram's fleet was desperate enough to risk it. They landed under a shroud of static, stormlight crackling across the hulls of their salvaged freighters. 24 humans stepped onto the ice, wrapped in armor patched together from stolen Federation tech and scrap. Kalen walked among them, his pale skin glowing faintly in the storm light. The vault wasn't hard to find. A jagged fissure cut deep into the planet's crust, sealed with plates of alloy older than most of the galaxy's governments. Symbols of old Earth scarred the metal, symbols outlawed and erased by the Federation. "This isn't Federation work," Kalen murmured, fingertips brushing the markings. "This was human-made." Abram's throat tightened, Earth's last scream buried under ice. Marek, his infiltration lead, hacked the seals with stolen VIN encryption. Sparks spat across the fissure as the vault groaned open for the first time in centuries. The air inside was sterile, untouched, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic and dust. Rows of cryopods stretched into the dark, 17 in total. Each pod contained a human, their faces frozen in time, muscles locked, eyes shut. Each bore the mark, TH9. The rebels stared, breathless. "They're alive," whispered Bren. Abram stepped closer. One pod in particular drew his gaze, a woman with dark hair, her skin pale from cryostasis, her face calm, almost serene. Her placard read, TH907, Nara. His hand hovered above the control panel. Kalen's voice broke the silence. "Abram, if you wake them, you may unleash something you cannot stop." Abram's jaw clenched. His reflection stared back at him from the frost of the pod, scarred, hardened, a man built from chains and fire. "If they were built to break chains," he said quietly, "then maybe they're exactly what we need." His hand pressed the release. The hiss of ancient seals cracked the silence. Frost bled from the edges of the pod. Lights flickered. The woman's eyes shot open. And for the first time in centuries, Theta 9 breathed. The hiss of escaping frost echoed through the chamber like the breath of some buried god. Nara's eyes fluttered open. At first they were glazed, unfocused, clouded by centuries of sleep. Then her gaze locked onto Abram. She didn't speak at once. Instead, she gasped, not in fear, but like someone who had been drowning and finally broke the surface. Her body convulsed. Abram and Bren caught her before she fell, lowering her onto the cold alloy floor. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The chamber was silent except for her ragged breaths. Then she whispered a word no one had taught her, no one should have remembered. "Fire." Abram's chest tightened. He leaned closer. "Nara, can you hear me?" Her eyes, deep storm gray, darted around the room, taking in the rebels, the alien markings, the cryopods still sealed. Her hand trembled as it reached up, brushing Abram's scarred cheek. "You burn," she said softly, "like the others." "The others," Abram pressed. Nara shivered. Images seemed to flicker behind her eyes, memories spilling like cracks in glass. "Needles, screams, fire, they tried to make us forget, but we remembered, we always remembered." Kalen stepped forward cautiously, his translucent skin reflecting the faint glow of the cryopod lights. "She's unstable, cryo-degradation. The mind fractures after centuries." But then Nara sat upright with a steadiness that made the room freeze. Her voice strengthened, clear, steady. "No, I remember more than they ever wanted me to." She touched her temple, wincing as if something inside her skull burned. Her body shook, and for a moment Abram thought she might collapse again. Instead, she convulsed violently, collapsing against Bren's chest. Blood did not flow from her nose. Data did. Streams of glowing light pulsed across her neural pathways, flickering through her eyes and skin like circuitry carved into flesh. Kalen staggered back in shock. "She's not just alive," he whispered. "She's carrying something." Nara screamed. The cry carried not just pain but memory. A holographic projection burst from her body, splashing across the chamber walls. They all froze. The images were not random. They were files, blueprints, maps, records, thousands of encrypted data shards embedded in her mind, hidden in her biology. Abraham's heart hammered as the images sharpened. Schematics of a warship. A ship unlike any Federation design, built with angles like a predator's wings, its hull etched with old Earth emblems outlawed for centuries. A name flickered across the projection. Judicator. Bren swore under his breath. Kalen's voice trembled with awe. This is impossible. The Judicator was legend, a myth, a ghost story rebels told in the shadows. No, Nara gasped, her voice raw but firm. It was real. Earth's final scream before surrender. A weapon built in secret, hidden before they could launch it. They buried it on Drew's 2 beneath the storms, masked as tectonic interference. Her eyes burned as she locked onto Abraham's. They didn't just bury us, Abraham. They buried your ship, your fire. The Judicator was meant for you. The chamber erupted in shouts. Bren slammed his fist against the alloy wall. A warship, a planet cracker. If this is true, then we can finally fight them on equal ground. Kalen's face remained cold, wary. Or it destroys you. Weapons like that are not tools, they are curses. The Federation didn't hide it because they feared its power. They hid it because they feared what it would make of you. Abraham ignored the protests. His chest heaved as he stared at the holographic blueprints. The Judicator, a ship built by humanity for humanity, buried in silence until now. He thought of his father's death in the mines, his mother's sterilization, the boy executed for humming a song. He thought of every silence the Federation had forced onto his people. Now the silence was broken. Abraham turned back to his people, voice steel. We find this ship, we wake it, and when the Judicator rises, the galaxy will remember what it did to Earth. The rebels roared in agreement. Even Bren, half-scarred and broken, raised his weapon high. But not Kalen. The Xyrillian's black eyes lingered on Abraham, unreadable, heavy with something that looked dangerously like pity. That night, as the others prepared for departure, Abraham found himself alone with Nara. She sat near the flickering console, her face pale but her eyes burning with strange intensity. You've been asleep for centuries, Abraham said, and yet it feels like you know me. Nara tilted her head. Not you, the fire in you. It's the same fire that was in the first of us, the ones they tried to erase, the fire they called Theta 9. Her voice softened. It spreads, Abraham, through words, through looks, through memory. They thought it was a disease, but it's who we are. We don't forget. We pass pain like blood. Abraham's throat tightened. You're saying this rebellion, it didn't start with me. Nara's gaze locked onto his. No, it started the day the first human said no. You are just the one who remembered loud enough to make them hear again. Abraham felt the weight of her words like chains and wings all at once. For years he had believed he was the executioner, the one who lit the fire. But now he realized he was just the echo of something older, deeper, something woven into human blood. Before he could respond, the console beeped. Kalen's voice crackled through the comm. Commander, we intercepted a Federation signal. Scrambled, fragmented, but it mentions Theta 9. Abraham's chest clenched. Play it. Static, then a voice cold and precise. Subject still contained. Breach level red. Request termination protocol fallback. Human strain Theta 9 has demonstrated advanced cognitive spread. Containment no longer viable. Request permission to initiate Oblivion Directive. The message ended. The rebels froze, Bren cursed. Kalen's face went pale. Oblivion Directive, Kalen whispered. They're not just afraid, they're planning extermination. Abraham stared at the crackling console, his hands trembling against the edge. The Federation wasn't just hunting rebels, they were hunting Theta 9 itself. And if the Judicator was real, then it wasn't just a weapon. It was the reason the Federation was preparing to burn entire sectors into ash. Drew's 2 was colder than death. Not the kind of cold that bites at skin, but the kind that seeps into bone and lingers behind the eyes. The rebellion's fleet dropped through the storm-racked skis, battered by winds strong enough to shear hull plating. Magnetic lightning crackled across the atmosphere, lashing against Abraham's freighter as though the planet itself wanted to keep its secrets. This place is cursed, Bren muttered, gripping his harness as the freighter bucked violently. Nothing should live here. It doesn't, Kalen said flatly, his black eyes focused on the storm maps. That's why the Federation buried it here. No one comes to Drew's too willingly. Nara stood near the viewport, her gray eyes unblinking as the storm raged outside. For the first time since awakening, she looked calm, almost at home. Abram noticed, "You're not afraid." She shook her head. "It's not new to me. I've seen this place before, in dreams, in the memories they left buried in me." That chilled Abram more than the storm. The freighter groaned as it broke through the final cloud layer, descending into a canyon carved by tectonic scars. Below them stretched an abyss of jagged ice and black rock. And there, hidden in the shadows of the canyon wall, lay a vault. Even half buried in frost, Abram recognized it instantly. Its walls were plated with ancient carbon steel, etched with Earth's outlawed emblems, the star and wings of the old Terran Navy. Symbols the Federation had erased from every archive, every textbook, every tongue. His heart pounded. The Judicator was real. They landed in silence. 24 rebels disembarked, their armor layered against the cold. Kalen led with his scanners, Bren with his rifle, Nara with a strange certainty in her stride. Abram walked at the front, his breath visible in the frozen air. The vault door loomed like a cliff face. Marek's slicers went to work, cutting through the layers of encryption. Sparks flared, static cracked, and then slowly the ancient steel groaned open. The air that rushed out wasn't cold. It was sterile, preserved, waiting. They stepped inside. The chamber stretched half a kilometer, lined with scaffolding and old Earth machinery. But it was what hung in the center that froze the rebels in place. The Judicator. Suspended by electromagnetic anchors, the ship hovered like a predator with folded wings. Its hull was obsidian black, plated with jagged armor that seemed less built than forged, as if it had been carved from the bones of a star. Dim lights pulsed beneath its plating, faint but alive, like the heartbeat of something that had only been sleeping. Bren exhaled slowly, "By the stars." Kalen whispered, his voice heavy with awe and dread. "This is no warship, this is a monument." Nara's lips moved, barely a whisper. "Awake." It took 12 hours to bring the ship online. The Judicator's systems had been dormant for over a century, but the technology was unlike anything the rebels had touched. Old Earth engineering, sharp, efficient, brutal. The consoles didn't require Federation clearance. They required something deeper. When Abram approached the command console, the lock sealed with a triple-layer biometric barrier. No one else could even touch it without triggering a shutdown. But when he pressed his hand against the pad, the system hissed softly and opened. The bridge lights surged, screens flickered. Ancient Terran code scrolled across every panel, and then a voice filled the chamber. "Calm male human. Judicator online, primary user confirmed. Genetic imprint match, Abram." The rebels froze. Abram's heart stopped. System integrity, 87%. Planet Cracker core offline, awaiting activation. For a moment the bridge was silent, then all eyes turned toward Abram. "How?" Bren whispered. Kalen's face was pale, unreadable. This ship was locked to a genetic key. Old Earth command protocols. Only those encoded in its database could access it. Nara stepped forward slowly, her eyes fixed on Abram. "You were meant to find it." Abram shook his head. "No, I was a labor-class orphan, shackled at 7. I was never part of this." The ship's voice spoke again, calm and implacable. "User Abram, file cross-reference, Project Theta 9. Prototype designation TH901, status unstable, continuation aborted." The words echoed like thunder in the silent chamber. Abram staggered back, his chest heaving. "Prototype." Nara's face was pale, her voice trembling. "You weren't just another human, Abram, you were their first attempt." The rebels stared in stunned silence. Abram's scars burned like fire. His memories of childhood, the strange medical scans, the needles, the dreams that never made sense, all rushed back like a storm breaking. He wasn't just a man who cut a shackle from his skull. He was the failure of something older, something darker. The voice of the Judicator filled the chamber again. "Subject TH901. Abram, you are not a mistake, you are the key." Abram's hands shook against the console as the realization sank in. The rebellion wasn't just his choice, it was his design. 56, 55, 54. The countdown pulsed through the Judicator's bridge like a heartbeat, each number rattling bone and thought. The great ship's voice had shifted. It was no longer calm, no longer a guide. It was absolute, the echo of old Earth's high command written into steel. If captured, deny the enemy Earth itself. A safeguard against surrender. A final cruelty disguised as strategy. The rebels stared at the display. Earth hung small and blue on the forward screen, a jewel in a coffin of stars. The world they had sworn to avenge was about to be destroyed by its own last weapon. "Cancel it," Abram roared. His hand slammed the console. "Judicator abort firing sequence." "Denied," the ship intoned. "Authorization required," founding command code phrase. 4948-47. Bren tore off his helmet, scarred face wild. "We're going to kill our own mother." Kalen's voice cut like a blade. "This isn't sabotage. This was their design. Your leaders feared betrayal more than extinction. They built a weapon to turn on itself if captured." "Not on itself," Nara said, her eyes fixed on Abram. "On him." Abram turned, chest heaving. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer. "You are TH-901, the prototype. They tied the failsafe to you. That's why it responds to your imprint, your hand, your blood. You are the key, Abram, but you are also the trigger." 42-41-40. The bridge shook as the Federation fleet outside opened fire. Energy bolts crashed against the Judicator's shields, brilliant arcs of white. The ship absorbed them with a low growl, as though it welcomed the violence. Kalen's hands flew over his console. "We can't take them and the failsafe, one or the other, but not both." "Then shut the failsafe down," Abram barked. Kalen's jaw clenched. "I can't, the lock is genetic, only you." Nara's eyes burned into Abram's. "There's something in me, memories they hid, the Founder's codes. They didn't just bury the Judicator in me, they buried the override." 34-33-32. She reached forward, pressing her hands against Abram's temples. Pain tore through him like molten glass. Images flooded his skull, doctors with cold eyes, needles in bone, Earth's oceans burning in simulations, children in white rooms whispering numbers. And then a phrase, old and simple, carved into memory like scripture. "We do not forget." Abram gasped, his lips forming the words. Code phrase, "We do not forget." The Judicator paused, lights flickered, the countdown halted at 29. "Verification accepted," the ship said at last. Its voice softened, shifting back toward something almost human. "Failsafe disengaged, Earth removed from targeting array." Every rebel exhaled at once. Bren collapsed against the rail, laughing like a madman. Kalen slumped in his chair. Nara's hands slid from Abram's skull, her breath ragged, eyes wet. But the relief lasted only a breath. Outside, the Federation fleet closed in. Dozens of purge barges surrounded the storm belts. The lead flagship loomed at the center, its hull bristling with sterilization cannons large enough to flay continents. And Luravel's face still hovered above the forward rail, her voice cutting through the storm. "You see now," she said quietly. "The Federation doesn't fear your fire, they fear your memory. That's what Theta 9 was always about. Pain turned into inheritance, you don't forget. You make suffering into story, into vengeance, and they were right to fear it." Bren spat, then let them choke on fear. Abram stood tall on the dais, the golden glow of the Judicator systems painting his scarred face. For the first time, the ship was no longer pulling him like a leash. It was listening, waiting. He looked at Luravel's projection. "You want me to stand down after what they've done?" Her iridescent eyes held his. "I want you to remember more than pain." Nara's voice was steady, sharp. "They will sterilize every human colony, Abram, every chain we haven't broken yet. If we hesitate, we lose them all." Kalen cut in, voice precise. "If we fire the planet cracker, we invite extinction. They'll glass every world in response. But if we don't strike, they erase us slowly, quietly. Either way," he let the silence finish the sentence. The ship's voice returned, calm and implacable. "Planet cracker core fully charged. Weapon integrity optimal, awaiting command." The bridge thrummed like a drumskin stretched over fire. Outside, the sterilization fleet lit its weapons. Inside, humanity's last warship growled for blood. Nara's hand brushed Abram's arm. Her voice was softer now, meant for him alone. "Whatever choice you make, they'll call you a monster. but only one choice makes you human. Abram's jaw locked. He raised his hand over the wheel. The galaxy held its breath. "Judicator," he said. "Target." The bridge shook violently, cutting him off. Alarms blared. A different signal surged across Kalen's board. He froze, eyes wide. "They're not just broadcasting sterilization orders," he whispered. "They're releasing something, a containment breach in the Delta Fringe." Nara's face went white. "What kind of breach?" Kalen swallowed. "Theta 9, they're waking the rest." The bridge fell silent, except for the ship's voice counting down the fleet's attack. And for the first time, Abram felt true fear. Because the Federation wasn't just hunting free humans anymore. They had just unleashed an entire generation of Theta 9s. The bridge lights pulsed red. Outside, the Federation fleet closed in, sterilization cannons priming. Inside, the Judicator thrummed like a beast straining at its chains, its planet cracker ready to scream. But Kalen's console glared with a new horror. "Theta 9, he whispered. "They've opened the vaults." Nara's face tightened. "All of them." Kalen nodded slowly. Every cryopod, every subject sealed since the first experiments. Thousands of them spread across hidden sites in the Delta Fringe. The Federation would rather unleash them than risk us controlling the fire alone. Bren cursed under his breath. "Mad bastards, they're feeding their own nightmare." Abram stood at the center of the dais, fists clenched, staring at the storm of signatures flooding across Kalen's display. Dozens, hundreds, too many. Some signals winked out immediately, vaults torn apart by centuries of decay. But others flared bright, alive, spreading like sparks in dry grass. "They're not soldiers," Nara said. Her voice was low, haunted. "They're contagion, memory contagion. One Theta 9 can infect an entire colony just by surviving. Imagine thousands. The galaxy won't just burn, it will drown in rage." Luravel's hologram still hovered above the forward rail. For the first time, her voice trembled. "You see now, this was never just about humanity's chains. It was about what happens if you break them." The Judicator's voice boomed, steady, patient. "Primary cannon, charged. Target confirmation required." Abram stared at the fleet outside. The purge barges gleamed like blades aimed at every human world. His own people looked at him, Bren trembling with fury, Kalen calculating with cold precision, Nara eyes alive with fire and grief. One choice would scorch the Federation fleet to ash, ignite rebellion across the stars, and unleash vengeance unstoppable. The other might mean chains again, silence again. The weight of history pressed down on Abram's shoulders like a planet. He remembered the boy executed for humming a song, his mother sterilized, his father dead in the mines, every silence carved into human throats. And he remembered Nara's hand against his cheek, her voice steady. "They'll call you a monster no matter what you do, but only one choice makes you human." He lifted his hand over the wheel. "Judicator," he said. "Target." The ship's lights flickered suddenly. Kalen swore. "Override signal, external, something," trying to seize fire control. Nara gasped. "It's not the Federation." On the forward display, a new transmission forced itself onto the channel. Static cleared. A face appeared, human, pale, eyes black with rage and brilliance. "I am Theta 9, the man said. His voice echoed like many voices at once. "We are awake." The bridge fell silent. "You think you lead the fire, Abram," the man sneered. "But you are only the spark. We are the inferno. While you begged for scraps of freedom, we dreamed in silence. Now we rise, and the galaxy will drown in memory." Nara stepped forward, her voice shaking. "No, that's not what we were made for. We remember to endure, not to destroy." The man's smile was cold. "Endurance is just a slower kind of killing." The feed cut. Kalen's board erupted with signatures. Theta 9 vessels, or what remained of them, were spilling into real space, hijacking whatever they could fly, spreading chaos through the Federation fleet itself. Purge barges were turning on each other, crews infected by the very rage they had tried to contain. "The galaxy's collapsing," Kalen breathed. "If we fire now, we'll finish it. If we don't, they will." Abram looked at the wheel, then at his people. Bren's voice was iron. "Burn them, all of them, end it." Kalen's was sharp, surgical. "If you burn everything, you inherit nothing." Nara was quiet. "You decide what story we leave behind." Abram closed his eyes. For one long moment he listened, to the hum of the judicator, to the breath of his crew, to the silence of Earth waiting in the dark. Then he spoke. Judicator, cancel primary fire. The ship hesitated, systems groaned, the golden glow flickered, then the voice answered. Command accepted, planet cracker disarmed. The rebels gasped, Bren cursed aloud, Kalen sagged with relief, Nara's eyes shone. But Abram wasn't finished. He stepped forward, his voice hard as steel. Judicator, open every channel, broadcast everywhere. Confirmed, the ship intoned. Abram's scarred face appeared on 1 billion screens across the galaxy. His voice carried on every frequency, every shadowed dome and broken colony where humans still bowed their heads. You called us slaves, you called us brutes, you bred us to obey, and when you failed, you tried to erase us. But hear me now, we do not forget, we never forget. And we choose what comes next, not vengeance, not silence, memory, our memory. The fire you tried to bury has risen and it will burn away your lies, but we will not become you. We will not trade one set of chains for another. Humanity remembers, and humanity endures. The broadcast ended. Outside, the Federation fleet fractured in chaos. Theta 9 spread like wildfire, turning soldiers against their masters. But the Judicator did not fire. It loomed above the battlefield like a shadow made of memory, watching, waiting. Luravel's hologram flickered one last time. Her voice was soft, reverent. You chose to remember. That makes you dangerous in ways they never understood. Abram lowered his hand from the wheel. His face was lined with fury and exhaustion, but there was clarity in his eyes. He had not burned the galaxy, he had given it a choice. Whether it survived, that choice was no longer up to him. Months later, the war burned on. The Federation collapsed in on itself, torn between rebellion and Theta 9's contagion. Human colonies rose, fractured, fought, rebuilt. Chaos, yes, but chaos with seeds of something new. The Judicator hung in orbit above Earth, not as a weapon, as a monument, a memory. On the surface, Abram walked the soil of his homeworld for the first time without chains. No collar, no code, just footsteps. Beside him, Nara watched the sky with storm-gray eyes, her face unreadable. Do you think it's over? She asked quietly. Abram looked up at the Judicator, its black hull gleaming in the sunlight. No, he said, but it's ours now. For the first time, it's ours. The wind carried the sound of waves across the broken coasts. For the first time in centuries, it sounded like freedom. Epilogue: Legacy of Fire. In the decades that followed, historians would argue over Abram's choice. Some called him a coward for sparing the Federation fleet. Others called him a savior for sparing the galaxy itself. But none could deny the truth written in humanity's blood. The Federation had feared humans not because of their violence, but because of their memory. Because they carried pain across centuries, turning wounds into stories, stories into fire. And now that fire had burned away the chains. The galaxy would never forget again.